The distress beacon had been screaming for 6 minutes before Lieutenant Cole Marsh cut his shuttle's thrust and let it drift toward the wreckage. 6 minutes was a long time in space. Long enough for a ship to break apart, long enough for a crew to die, and, as the sensors now showed, long enough for something alive and very large to crawl out of the debris field entirely on its own. The nav computer described the contact's movement as purposeful velocity, which was a polite way of saying it was heading straight for his shuttle, and did not appear to be struggling with the vacuum of open space the way every piece of conventional biology said it should. Cole pulled up the visual feed and increased magnification. What he saw had 4 limbs, a broad torso, and a movement pattern that was not tumbling, not drifting, not dying. It was crossing the distance between the wreck and his shuttle the way a person crosses a street when they know exactly where they are going and have already decided that traffic is not a serious obstacle. He keyed the broadcast channel. All frequencies. Standard retrieval protocol. This is Lieutenant Cole Marsh, Earth Defense Corps, Shuttle Zephyr 4. I am reading one survivor from the freighter wreck at Grid 77 Alpha. Please identify yourself and I will attempt a retrieval. Static. Then a sound came back through the hull. Not through the comm channel, through the actual metal of the shuttle. A low resonant vibration that made the instrument panels hum faintly and caused the overhead lighting to flicker once. Cole checked the external hull integrity indicator. Nothing had touched the ship. The sound was coming from whatever was moving toward him. It covered the remaining distance in 40 seconds. It pressed itself flat against the airlock viewport, and Cole got his first real look at it. 7 feet of mass distributed the way a species that evolved under serious gravitational pressure distributes mass, dense and layered and structured around function rather than form. The skin was gray-green with a texture that looked hammered, like the surface had been worked over by something that prioritized durability above all other considerations. The face had 2 eyes, large and amber and extremely alert, and a mouth that was open slightly, showing teeth that had one purpose and had been shaped very specifically for that purpose over a very long time. 4 fingers on each hand. Those hands were currently pressed flat against his viewport with a patience that was, somehow, more unsettling than aggression would have been. It looked at him. It pointed at the airlock. Cole sat in his pilot's seat for 3 full seconds. He opened the airlock. He filed the quarantine notification to command while the outer door was cycling. He activated the partition between the cockpit and the retrieval bay. He checked that his sidearm was on the magnetic clip at his hip, accessible but holstered, because the retrieval protocol for unknown biological entities, classified as non-hostile, required him to keep it that way until he had evidence of a threat. The inner door opened. Novenit stepped through and immediately occupied most of the rear compartment in the way that a piece of furniture occupies a room. Not aggressively, just thoroughly. It looked at him. It looked at the walls and the ceiling and the instrument consoles visible through the partition. It looked at the medical kit mounted near the door. It pointed at the medical kit. It pointed at itself. Cole picked up the translation wrist panel and ran a passive scan on the sounds it had been making. The software was 3rd-generation Earth Defense Corps issue, rated for 412 languages, including 7 non-humanoid dialects. And it was considered very good. It thought about the sounds for 11 seconds. It returned one word: inspection. Cole looked at the creature. The creature looked back at Cole with those amber eyes, and its expression communicated nothing that he had a frame of reference for, which was both honest and deeply uncomfortable. "But you want me to inspect you," Cole said. Not a question. Just his brain working the information out loud. The creature took one step forward. Then it stopped. It held its arms slightly away from its sides, the posture of someone at a security checkpoint who has been told not to move and intends to comply. It was waiting. Cole Marsh had spent 9 years in the Earth Defense Corps. 3 deep space tours, 2 border conflict rotations, and 4 months on a station with a gas leak that nobody fixed because the maintenance requisition kept getting routed to the wrong department. He had a commendation on his record for pulling a pilot out of a burning cockpit on Europa Station, and a formal reprimand for submitting a 20-page argument against the caloric content of Ration Pack 7, which his commanding officer had described as thorough but inappropriate. Or he had never been asked by an alien warrior to perform a medical inspection. He picked up the medical kit. The creature did not move. Cole ran the external scanner across it on broad-spectrum mode. The scanner was designed for human physiology, but had a general biomass function that could at least identify structural damage if it was severe enough. What it found was that this creature had experienced a significant impact event. It flagged 3 fractures. One was flagged in red with a note that said, "Consult physician," which Cole was not, but was the closest available option. "You have 3 fractures," he said. "One of them is deep. Do you understand me?" The creature made a short, low sound. The translation software said, "Confirmed." "Are you in pain?" Another sound. The software processed it and returned. Not a factor. Cole looked at the readout, looked at the creature. "I'm going to treat what I can. The accelerant I have is dosed for human bone density. Yours is roughly 3 times that, so I need to adjust the application. This may take a moment." He started recalibrating the applicator. The creature watched him do it with the attentive stillness of something that was gathering data. "What do you call yourself?" Cole said, not looking up. "Your species. Is there a name?" A sound came back. The software took 4 seconds this time. It said, "Veth, warrior." "Greth?" Cole said. "We're trying the closest phonetic approximation of the sound." The creature did not correct him. Cole decided that was close enough. "Okay, Greth," he said. "I need you to sit down. The deep fracture is high on your torso and I cannot reach it standing, and I am not getting on a step stool to apply bone accelerant during a field retrieval. That is the one line I draw." Greth sat down. The emergency lighting cast everything in pale blue, and Greth's gray-green skin took on a quality that made him look like something sculpted rather than born. He sat with his back straight and his arms still held slightly away from his body. That security checkpoint posture maintained even while seated. And he watched Cole with complete, steady attention. Cole started with the forearm fracture. It was the most accessible, under 3 inches of what the scanner confirmed was natural plating. Material dense enough that the scanner had initially classified it as equipment before revising the assessment. He pressed the accelerant applicator to the site and activated the first dose. Greth did not flinch. Not a twitch. Not a change in breathing. Nothing. Cole moved to the second fracture, mid-torso, which required him to step in close enough that he could feel the heat radiating off Greth's body. And the scanner had noted a surface temperature approximately 15 degrees above human baseline, which explained several things and raised several more questions that Cole filed away for later. Still nothing from Greth. Still those amber eyes, tracking him, watching the process with something that looked like interest. The third fracture was the red-flagged one. Deep, internal, in something the scanner identified as analogous to a rib structure. Cole examined the readout and made his adjustments and looked at Greth. "This one might register," he said. "Your pain threshold is unknown to me." A short sound. The software said, "Proceed." He proceeded. Greth's jaw tightened, once, briefly. Then it was still again. Cole finished, stepped back, and repacked the kit with the methodical focus of someone who had made a deliberate choice not to think too hard about the context of what he was doing until after he was done doing it. But he was done now. The context was still there, patient as Greth, waiting to be thought about. "That's what I can do with what I have," he said. "The accelerant takes about 4 hours to fully bond. You should avoid strenuous activity during that window." Greth looked at him, made a sound. The software said, "You are the first human to treat a Veth wound." Cole put the kit back on the wall clip. "Yeah," he said. I had a feeling I was setting some kind of record tonight." He went back to the pilot's seat, entered the coordinates for the nearest Earth Defense Corps station 14 hours out, and began running through the post-incident forms he was required to complete. Behind him, Greth settled against the shuttle wall with a careful, deliberate movement of something unaccustomed to being still, but choosing to be. 14 hours. Cole had a feeling this was going to be the most interesting 14 hours of his career. He was right. He had no idea yet how many different ways he was going to be right. Greth did not sleep. Cole was not entirely surprised. He had logged 8 hours of contact with unknown biological entities in his career, spread across 4 different species. And in his experience, the ones built for combat did not sleep easily in enclosed spaces with a single human they had met 40 minutes ago. And what surprised him was that Greth also did not watch him with the constant, measuring attention of something calculating threat levels. Instead, Greth watched the viewport. The stars. The way the debris field from the Veth fleet wreck caught the distant light of the sector's sun and scattered it into a slow, quiet field of metal and dust. Cole ate his ration pack. He filed 3 notifications to command. He ran through the post-incident forms and considered, briefly, whether what he had technically done constituted an unauthorized alien contact event, and decided that it did, technically, and that the retrieval protocol clearly covered it anyway, and that the formal review could happen after he got everyone safely to a station. At hour 3, Greth spoke. The software processed it and returned. Question. "Go ahead," Cole said. Greth made a longer sound. The software took a moment. "Your kind. You repair without confirmation of alliance." Cole turned slightly in his seat. "You mean I treated your injuries without knowing if you were on my side?" Confirmed question. "Yes," Cole said. "That's standard protocol. Someone is injured, you help them. The alliance question comes after." Greth was quiet. Then, "This is not logical." "No," Cole said. "It's not. It's something different." Another pause. The software produced, "Explain different." Cole thought about how to say it. "Logic tells you not to give resources to an unknown quantity. But the protocol exists because we decided that a world where you only help people who are confirmed allies is a world we don't want to live in. So we made a different rule, and we follow it, even when logic says we shouldn't." Greth processed this for a long time. The software eventually produced, "You govern behavior by preference, not efficiency." "Sometimes," Cole said. Then, "The Veth do not do this. What wounded in battle are responsible for their own survival. If they cannot survive, they were not strong enough to be worth preserving." "That sounds like a hard way to build a fleet," Cole said. The software struggled with the response. It produced, "Not understood." "Never mind," Cole said. At hour 5, Greth spoke again without being prompted, which Cole noted as a change. The sound was longer, and the software took significant processing time before returning. The Veth fleet was ambushed on 17 warships. Greth's vessel was the last one standing when the formation broke. Greth's vessel did not survive the sector's edge. Cole put down the report form he was reviewing. 17 ships. What ambushed you? The response came back without a translation, just the software's flag. No equivalent designation. Species unknown to translation database. Territorial expansion pattern. Arrived in this sector 40 days ago. 40 days, Cole said. Are they still in the sector? Confirmed. Cole pulled up the sector map on the navigation panel. Clean. Nothing flagged by Earth Defense Corps command. Either they had missed it, or the intelligence had not propagated, or, and this was the possibility that sat the least comfortably in his stomach, the information simply had not reached anyone with the authority to act on it yet. How many Veth ships are left in the sector? Greth looked at him. Then, Greth. One ship, which was now debris 3 hours behind them. Cole leaned back and stared at the ceiling for a moment. Then he opened the long-range communication array and began composing a priority message to command. Not a standard incident form. A full strategic alert, formatted under the code that got routed to sector command rather than the normal filing queue, with all the flags that made it clear this was not a retrieval update. He wrote it carefully. Unknown hostile species. Confirmed engagement record of 17 Veth warships destroyed. Current sector position unknown. 1 Veth survivor in custody. Strategic data potentially available. Recommendation for immediate command-level attention. He sent it and went back to his controls. Greth had watched him do all of it. You sent an alert to your leadership, Greth said, and the software produced it cleanly. Yes. Then, without being ordered. Yes. Greth was still for a long moment. Then, behavior noted. They flew for another 2 hours without speaking. Cole ran system checks and Greth watched the stars. At hour 7, Cole ran the scanner again and found that the red flag on the internal fracture had dropped to yellow. The bone accelerant was working ahead of schedule. Greth's cellular repair rate was, the scanner noted in a supplementary observation, approximately 3 times faster than human baseline, which explained several things that Cole had been quietly cataloging. Some fractures are coming along well, Cole said. Ahead of projection. Greth looked at the scanner. Then, your tool is not designed for Veth anatomy. No, Cole said. I worked with what I had. A pause. Then, it was sufficient. Cole had received formal commendations that felt like less. He decided not to say that out loud. At hour 8, something changed on the long-range array. It was subtle. Not a contact. Not a ship. A signal. Passive. The kind of thing that could be background radiation if you were not looking for it specifically. And Cole had not been looking for it specifically. Which was why it took him a moment to register that it was sitting at bearing 047, approximately 2 light minutes off the port side, and that it was not on any frequency in his library. He almost flagged it as anomalous and moved on. Greth stood up. Not stood gradually. Stood, with the speed of something going from rest to full engagement in the space between heartbeats. And the shuttle rocked slightly from the displacement of that much mass in motion. Greth was at the viewport facing port side before Cole had finished turning in his seat. You recognize that signal? Cole said. Greth's response came through the software with no lag at all. The ones who took the fleet. Cole looked at his display. 2 light minutes. Stationary. No movement signatures. Just there. on bearing 047, watching them or not watching them. There was no way to know which. And that uncertainty was its own kind of pressure. Then he looked at Greth. And Greth looked back at him. And Greth reached into a compartment built into its own plating, which Cole had genuinely not known existed, and produced something black and hexagonal, roughly the size of a data chip, with a faint interior luminescence that pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. Greth held it out. Then Greth spoke, and the software produced it piece by piece, everything the Veth know about them, their fleet positions, their tactical approach pattern, the weaknesses they do not know the Veth identified. This data must reach your leadership before they move deeper into this sector. Cole looked at the chip. If I boost the transmitter to reach command at maximum range, the signal will be visible to anything in this sector. Greth said one word. The software said, yes. And our odds if whatever is on bearing 047 decides to move on us after we light up. Greth looked at the overhead panel and then at Cole. The software produced poor. Poor odds, one shuttle, unknown hostile, and you need me to be a signal fire. A pause, then, you repaired a Veth wound without proof of alliance. This is a similar choice. Cole Marsh sat in his pilot's seat and held Greth's data chip and thought about that for exactly 4 seconds. And then he slotted the chip into the transmitter port and began configuring the boost array for maximum range broadcast. All right, he said. Let's see what happens. The transmitter powered up. The signal went out. At bearing 047, something that had destroyed 17 Veth warships began to move. It was moving toward them at a pace the nav computer classified as intercept velocity. Cole's hands were steady. He had a commendation and a reprimand and a medical kit rated for human physiology. He also had Greth standing beside him now, not behind him. Beside him, shoulder to shoulder with him in the way that soldiers stand when there is nothing to do but stand. And the amber eyes were looking at the display with the same attention they had given everything else. Greth said something. The software gave it back. I will not let you face this alone. Cole did not answer immediately. He was calculating. The bearing was steady, the velocity was increasing. And then the visual feed resolved the contact from one blurry shape into something clearer and clearer, and then clear enough that the nav computer logged a formation rather than a single vessel. 5 ships. Moving in a pattern his computer had no designation for. Tight and fast and coordinated the way things are coordinated when they have done this particular motion many times before. Greth, Cole said. And the Veth warrior looked at the display and then made a quiet sound, and the software produced. We transmitted the data. Whatever happens now, the sector knows. That's a very calm philosophy, Cole said. Another sound. The Veth say that a warrior who has completed their purpose has already survived. Cole thought about that for a moment. Humans say it's not over until it's over. He activated the short-range missile array. 4 missiles, 5 ships. The targeting computer offered single solution options, and Cole declined all of them and configured for spread deployment instead, a geometry the manual did not recommend for these odds, but which was at least mathematically interesting as a deterrent. He put his hand on the firing trigger. The formation decelerated, not to slow past speed, to a full stop, 200,000 kilometers out, which was close enough for the visual feed to resolve hull details, but not close enough for weapon solutions at the speed Cole's missiles traveled. They just stopped. Held position. Engines running. No weapon signatures registering on the scanner. No communication on any frequency. Nothing. Cole did not fire. He sat there with his hand on the trigger, and the formation sat there in the dark, and nobody did anything for 37 seconds, which was long enough to be strange. "What are they doing?" Cole said. Greth made a sound. The software said, "Reading the transmission." "They intercepted the broadcast?" Another sound. "They always intercept." That was the purpose. Cole turned very slowly and looked at Greth. "You knew they would read it." Greth looked at him. The amber eyes were steady. The software worked carefully. The transmission contained a locator protocol, active only when the transmission is processed by their signal receivers. "Your leadership now has precise coordinates for this formation." Cole sat with that. He thought about the acknowledgement he had received from command 2 hours after his initial alert, the one that had said, "Acknowledged. Do not engage. Maintain position. Maintain position." "How long have you been planning this?" Cole said. Greth made a short sound. The software said, "Since the airlock opened." Cole looked at the display. 5 ships, stationary, 200,000 kilometers out. And then, because he was now looking for it in a way he had not been before, he checked the long-range array and saw what was 4 hours behind them at emergency speed. 6 Earth Defense Corps vessels, bearing directly for his position. Maintain position. He let out a breath. "You used the data chip to bait them," Cole said. "You knew they would intercept the transmission and process it. You knew the locator would activate when they did. But you needed a shuttle with a powerful enough transmitter to reach command at long range, and you needed a reason for that shuttle to boost to maximum range." Greth made a sound. The software said, "The wounded Veth warrior requiring urgent medical assistance provided that reason." Cole stared at him. Greth's expression communicated nothing. Those amber eyes held steady. "The fractures were real," Cole said. "I scanned you." Another sound. "Real. Yeah, but you still planned all of this from the moment you saw my shuttle coming." The software took a moment. Then, "The Veth do not waste available resources. And I was a resource." A pause. Then, "You were a choice. There is a difference." The 6 EDC ships were closing. The formation at 200,000 kilometers held position. And Cole Marsh sat in his shuttle with a 7-foot alien warrior who had outthought a 14-hour rescue mission from inside a debris field in vacuum, and he tried to decide how he felt about that. After a moment, he decided he felt like someone who had been part of something that mattered, even if he had not known the full shape of it while it was happening. "Next time," he said, "you could just tell me." Greth made a sound. The software said, "You would have calculated the risk differently." "Yeah," Cole said. "Probably." The first Earth Defense Corps ship came on the comm channel. Captain Diane Lowe, EDCS Cruiser Aldrin. Her voice was the particular kind of level that command officers develop after long enough in the field, the tone that does not go up or down regardless of what is happening. Because the volume of what you communicate is not control. "Shuttle Zephyr 4, please confirm status." "Status is good," Cole said. 1 Veth survivor aboard, injuries treated, fully cooperative. "Captain, this survivor is the reason you have precise coordinates on that formation right now, and I would strongly recommend treating him accordingly when we come aboard." A pause. Then, "Understood. Bring him in." Cole looked at Greth. Greth looked at Cole. The amber eyes held something that Cole could not name in human terms. It was not gratitude, exactly. It was something more like recognition. "You ready to meet the rest of us?" Cole said. Greth made a sound. The software said, "I have been studying you for 9 hours. And?" The software produced it carefully. You are inefficient. You are illogical. You act before you fully calculate. You extend resources to unknown quantities and then fly into poor odds because someone asked you to. Yeah, Cole said. Another sound. You may be the most dangerous thing I have encountered in 40 days of combat. Cole fired the thrusters and brought the shuttle around toward the Aldrin's open airlock. We have our moments, he said. Behind them, 17 ships' worth of Veth debris caught the light and scattered it. Ahead, the Aldrin was big and bright and waiting, and Greth stood behind Cole the whole way in, those amber eyes absorbing everything, learning everything, filing everything away. Captain Diane Lowe was not what Greth had been constructing from the data. Greth had been constructing from the data the entire flight in. 14 hours was sufficient time to build a preliminary model of human command structure from Cole Marsh's behavior patterns, his communication style, the way he navigated the retrieval forms, the particular cadence of his decisions. The model had predicted a command officer who would be large, formal, and whose authority would be worn on the surface. Lowe was 5 feet 5 inches, stood with the stillness of someone who had stopped needing to display authority because it had long since become structural, and looked at Greth the way a person looks at a variable they are not yet ready to assign a value to. She looked at Cole next, briefly, and something passed between them in that 2-second exchange that Greth cataloged as a command assessment. She was confirming his condition, his reliability, and his read on the situation all at once. Lieutenant Marsh, she said. Oh, Captain, Cole said. Your report said the survivor was cooperative. Very, Cole said. Also instrumental. Also, in retrospect, significantly further ahead of me than the situation looked from my end. Lowe looked at Greth again. Greth made a sound. The Aldrin's translation software, older and slower than Cole's, worked for a long moment and produced, "Your lieutenant is also further ahead than the situation appeared from his end." Lowe's expression did not change. Something behind it did. I see, she said. Briefing room, both of you. The briefing room was large enough for a full crew meeting and smelled like recycled air and long hours. The particular atmosphere of a ship that had been running continuous operations for a while. Paul Carey, the intelligence officer, had the look of someone operating on stimulants and mission focus in roughly equal proportions. He had printed physical copies of the chip data alongside the digital display, which Greth noted as a human habit of backing up information in redundant formats. Practical. Lowe spread the chip data across the main table, and Paul went through it with a speed that signaled he understood what he was looking at. The fleet positions here, he said, pulling up the sector overlay. These match the anomalous signal patterns from 3 weeks ago that Command classified as background radiation. They mask their approach signatures, Cole said. Paul looked up. Now that's in the chip. Greth told me, Cole said, on the shuttle. Lowe looked at Greth. Is there anything in that chip that you have not told, Lieutenant Marsh? Greth made a sound. The software produced much. The chip contains 40 days of tactical observation. The flight allowed for conversation only. All right, Lowe said. Talk. What are we dealing with? Greth looked at the sector map. The 5 ships were still in containment hold, 300,000 kilometers off the Aldrin's bow. 3 of the 5 had been corralled before the net closed. 2 had gone to high-speed transit before the EDCS ships arrived and were somewhere in the sector with unknown intentions. Greth began with the basics. The species had no name in the Veth language, only a designation that translated roughly as the consuming, on which described their expansion pattern precisely and aesthetically as far as the Veth were concerned. They did not hold territory because they valued it. They moved through territory because motion was their operational state. They were not an empire with borders. They were a wave. "How many ships in total?" Paul said. The sound that came back was, the number Greth observed across 40 days of engagement was approximately 200. "This is not the full fleet. This is the forward element." Paul wrote 200 on his notepad and looked at it. Then he looked at the sector map. Then he looked at Cole, who nodded slightly in the way that meant he had already been through this particular feeling. 200 forward element, Lowe said. Main fleet is somewhere behind them. Confirmed. What is the main fleet's probable timeline for arrival in this sector? Greth looked at the map and at the chip data for a moment. Then, at their observed expansion rate, 60 to 90 days, and the forward element's objective. Another sound, assessment and disruption. They map resistance capability. They destroy what they can and observe how the remaining force responds. The response determines the main fleet's approach vector. Lowe was quiet for a moment. So, how the forward element gets handled directly affects where the main fleet hits. Confirmed. And the Veth fleet, Cole said. They hit it to observe how Veth Command would respond to the loss. Greth looked at him, and it was sound. The software said, and they got their answer. Lowe folded her arms. What was the answer? The sound Greth made was flat, and the software produced it flat. The Veth fleet fractured. Command protocols put individual vessel survival above collective response. Each captain attempted independent tactical withdrawal. They were destroyed individually. Lowe nodded slowly. It was not a warm nod. It was the nod of someone filing something away. And you were the exception. Another sound. Greth's captain was dead at 11 seconds. Greth made a different choice. Which was, Paul said. Greth looked at him, then at the viewport, then back to find the first available transmission asset and deliver the tactical data to a force capable of using it. Cole said very quietly, I was the first available transmission asset. Greth made a sound. The software said, you were also a choice. This has been stated. And Lowe looked between them for a moment. Then she brought the map to main display and moved forward. The 3 ships in containment, she said. We haven't destroyed them. Paul had asked about this in the corridor before the briefing, quietly, and Greth had heard it. The question was whether holding rather than destroying them was tactical hesitancy or deliberate strategy. Paul thought it might be the former. Greth had not offered an opinion. Greth offered one now. You chose to hold, Greth said, and the software produced it. Yes, Lowe said. Another sound. Why? Because I want to understand what I'm dealing with before I destroy it, Lowe said. Destruction is final. If my read on the situation is wrong, I cannot correct it afterward. Greth was still for a long moment. The amber eyes went to the viewport and stayed there. Then Greth said something, and the software produced. The Veth do not think this way. I know, Lowe said. How has that worked out for the Veth? It was a blunt thing to say to the sole survivor of 17 ships. Cole watched Greth's face carefully. The jaw worked once. Then Greth said, It has not. Then let's try something different, Lowe said. The idea she proposed used Greth as the signal architecture for a communication attempt with the 3 contained ships. The premise was that the species, whatever they were, had demonstrated the ability to intercept and read transmissions. They had proven they would respond to the correct structural format, because they had responded to the locator protocol in Greth's chip. If the response to being contained was not attack and not retreat, it was possible that a third option existed. "What do they respond to?" Paul said to Greth, in a way that does not end in engagement. Greth made a sound that the software worked on hard. They respond to demonstrated capability that stops before completion, unless they do not respect the absence of force. They respect force that exists and then pauses. The pause signals capacity, not weakness. It signals that the force has more available than what was shown. "We held 3 of their ships without firing," Cole said. "And they're still there." Greth looked at him. The sound was short. "It is a start." Paul built the signal based on Greth's guidance, and it took 2 hours, because getting the structural format right was like writing in a language you knew only through a handful of observed examples and working backwards from the grammar. Greth reviewed each iteration. Twice he indicated changes. The software rendered his corrections, and Paul rebuilt accordingly. The final message, translated back to English for the record, read, "We have capacity. We have stopped. Speak or we demonstrate further." "That's not diplomatic," Paul said. Greth made a sound. "It is accurate. They do not value diplomatic framing. They value precision. Lowe approved it. They sent it. 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Then the containment field logged a response on the same frequency, in the same structural format." Paul stared at his console with the expression of someone who had just seen something happen that the probability calculations in their head had not fully accounted for. Greth moved to the console and read the signal. The amber eyes moved across it quickly. Then Greth straightened and made a sound that the software produced. "They ask who stopped the force. They want to know who made the call," Lowe said. Another sound. "They want to understand the hierarchy before communicating further. They do not speak to instruments. They speak to the decision maker." "Tell them it was me," Lowe said. Greth transmitted it. 60-second wait. Then the response came back, and Greth read it. And when the translation came, the room was quiet enough that the ventilation system was the loudest thing in it. The software said, "They ask what you gain by not destroying them." Lowe took 4 seconds. Cole had watched her take 4 seconds before on the shuttle when she was deciding whether to bring them both aboard. And he had the impression that for Lowe, 4 seconds was a comprehensive process. "Tell them I gain the chance to understand what I'm dealing with," she said. "Orcs, and so do they." Greth transmitted it. The response came back in under 30 seconds. Greth read it, and something changed in Greth's face. Not much. But Cole had spent 9 hours watching that face, and he caught it. "Greth," Cole said. "What does it say?" Greth looked at Lowe, then at Cole, then back at Lowe. The software produced it word by word. The human commander reasons like something that has survived a long time. Paul exhaled. Then the bridge officer at the back of the room said something low that Cole did not catch, but understood. Lowe's expression did not change. "What does that mean in their terms?" she said. Greth made one short sound. The software said, "It is the closest word they have for respect." Lowe nodded once. Then she went back to the sector map and began drawing lines on it that were not engagement vectors. They were corridors. They were the beginning of a boundary. They were the first rough sketch of a geometry that acknowledged more than one kind of force in the same space. "We have 60 to 90 days before the main fleet arrives," she said. "And 3 ships over there that just started talking. Paul, I want full analysis of the chip data cross-referenced with the response signals. Greth, I need everything you observed about their main fleet structure." Cole. Cole looked up. "You did good work," she said. It was not warm. It was accurate, which was better. The credit belongs to the field protocol," Cole said, "and to Greth." Lowe looked at Greth. "You chose to trust a single human lieutenant in a small shuttle as your entire operational asset." Greth made a sound. The software said. He opened the airlock. "That was enough?" Lowe said. Another sound. It told Greth what he needed to know. Lowe looked at Cole for a moment. Then she turned back to the map and the work that needed doing, because there was a great deal of it. And 60 to 90 days was not as long as it sounded when the thing arriving had 200 ships in its forward element and more behind it. Cole stood at the edge of the room and thought about airlock doors, about the 4 seconds it had taken him to decide to open one, and what that decision had apparently communicated to something that had watched 17 warships burn, and still had the presence to plan a 14-hour operation from inside a debris field in vacuum. Then he thought about what Greth had called him, the word the software could not translate. The approximation, one who acts rightly before they understand why. He was not sure that was entirely accurate. He had been afraid. He had done the math on poor odds. He had known, when he boosted the transmitter, that he was lighting a fire that might attract the worst thing in the sector. But he had also known that Greth had pointed at the medical kit and pointed at himself, Ambrar, and that whatever that gesture meant across the distance of species and biology and history, it had meant something. And that meaning had been enough. The next 14 days on the Aldrin were unlike anything Paul Carey had experienced in 6 years of intelligence work. And Paul had experienced things that would have defied description in 3 languages. The communication with the 3 contained ships did not end after the first exchange. It built. Slowly, carefully, in the structural format that Greth had identified, and that Paul was now mapping the way a linguist maps a new dialect, finding the recurring patterns, identifying the load-bearing elements, understanding which components were navigable and which were load-bearing walls you did not move without consequences. Greth was present for every exchange, not as a translator, though the software continued to root through Greth's guidance on nuance. Be as something more like a cultural architecture consultant, someone who understood the internal logic of the system they were trying to communicate with, because Greth had spent 40 days on the other side of it. They do not have a concept of neutral parties, Greth told Paul on day 4, when Paul was trying to structure a question about the main fleet's timeline. In their framework, all entities are either in motion toward a goal or in motion away from one. The concept of waiting without objective does not translate. So asking about the main fleet's timeline reads as asking what their goal is, Paul said. Correct. And telling them our goal is to understand the situation. Greth made a sound. The software said, tells them you are in motion. It confirms agency. This is favorable. Paul revised the signal, sent it, waited. The response, when it came, was longer than any previous one. Greth read it for a full 3 minutes, and then, they want to know the size of the force behind the human commander. Lowe was in the room. Tell them the truth, she said. Paul looked up. Captain, revealing our fleet strength to a potentially hostile species. We have been telling them the truth in every exchange, Lowe said. They have identified it each time. If I start withholding now, we lose whatever this is. Paul looked at Greth. Greth made a sound the software produced as, the captain is correct. They read precision and they read deviation from it. They have been building a model of her since the first response. A deviation now would be noted. Paul sent the fleet strength data. Accurate, not complete because the Earth Defense Corps had assets in adjacent sectors, but accurate for the Aldrin's current battle group. The response came back in 11 minutes. Greth read it and then turned to look at Loe with those amber eyes steady in the particular way that Cole had learned. Meant Greth had information he was assessing before delivering. "Greth," Loe said. The sound Greth made was long, and the software produced it piece by piece. "They have transmitted to the main fleet. They have told the main fleet that the force in this sector is different from the Veth. The Veth fought in their expected pattern. The humans fight in a pattern that has not been observed before. They have recommended the main fleet hold at the sector boundary until further assessment is complete." The room was quiet. Paul counted something on his fingers, apparently automatically, and then stopped counting and stared at the table. Cole, who was in the room because Loe had been keeping him close since the Aldrin pickup in the way that people keep the person who understands the context close, sat forward in his chair. "They delayed the main fleet," he said. Greth looked at him. The sound was short. "They did not delay. They requested assessment time. There is a difference, but the effect is approximately the same." "How long does assessment time buy us?" Loe said. Greth: "Unknown. They have never encountered a species that fought back in the way the humans fought at the containment. The logical action that they expected was either continued engagement or retreat, when Loe's choice produced an outcome outside their predictive model. They want more data before committing the main fleet." "So, we have time," Paul said, "but only as long as we keep doing things that don't fit their model." Greth made a sound the software produced as, "This is accurate and also precarious." "I'm aware," Loe said. "Let's make it work anyway." What it looked like from the inside was like nothing Cole had a framework for. He had a framework for combat, for retrieval operations, Budar for the administrative processing of unusual incidents. He did not have a framework for watching a human captain negotiate with a species that had destroyed 17 alien warships and was holding its main fleet at a sector boundary because they had encountered something unexpected. The unexpected thing was Loe making choices that the species could not fit into their behavioral taxonomy. Not random choices, not unpredictable choices in the way a broken system is unpredictable. Ghost choices that followed a consistent internal logic that the species could observe but could not yet model, because the logic was not based on force calculation or resource efficiency. It was based on what Loe called, once, in a conversation with Paul that Cole overheard, the cost of being wrong. They calculate capacity and apply it, Loe told Paul. They do not calculate the cost of being wrong. A species that has been successful for long enough at the scale they operate at probably hasn't needed to. But it's the variable they can't account for in us, because we include it in every decision. Paul had said, and Greth's people didn't. Loe had looked at the viewport. Greth's people are 17 ships of debris. On day 9, the 3 contained ships made an unexpected transmission. It did not come through the established communication format. It came on a broad frequency, raw signal, and Greth had to build the translation from scratch over several hours, working with Paul and the software in a process that looked, to Cole, like someone reconstructing a message from fragments of a language they had studied but not spoken recently. What it said when they had it was this: the Veth were destroyed because they were alone. You are not alone. This distinction is recorded. Loe read it twice. Then she looked at Greth. What does that mean strategically? Greth made a sound. The software said, they are updating their threat model. A force that is not alone is a different category of obstacle. Their expansion methodology accounts for isolated resistance. It is less optimized for coordinated multi-species response. They've never encountered coordinated multi-species resistance, Paul said. Another sound. The Veth allied with no one. In 40 days, they sent no calls for support. When in 9 days, the humans have communicated with 2 species and changed the main fleet's timeline. This is a new variable. 2 species, Cole said. Us and the Veth. Greth looked at him. The sound was quiet. The software said, us. Cole sat with that word for a moment. Then he put it away for later, because there was work to do. On day 11, Lowe called a full staff briefing and laid out what she was calling the assessment framework, which was not a war plan. It was a process. The 3 contained ships were becoming, slowly and carefully, something closer to a provisional channel than a threat. The main fleet was holding. The forward element that had not been caught was somewhere in the sector doing something, but it had not engaged any Earth Defense Corps assets in 11 days. We have one advantage, Lowe said. We are currently the most interesting thing in their assessment. They do not move on things they are still assessing. This buys us time, but only if we continue to produce information they cannot fit into their existing model. How long can we do that? One of the bridge officers said. Lowe looked at Greth. Greth made a sound. The software said, the Veth could not do it at all. They had no behavior outside the expected model. But humans do? The officer said. Another sound. Humans have produced unexpected behavior in every exchange since the first signal. The decision to hold rather than destroy. The accuracy in communication. The inclusion of the Veth in the response framing. The reference to being not alone. Each of these was outside the predictive model. Cole thought about a shuttle airlock, a medical kit. A data chip he had not known contained a locator protocol. 14 hours. He thought about the word Greth had used, the one the software could not translate. One who acts rightly before they understand why. He thought that maybe the reason humans kept producing unexpected behavior was that they were genuinely working it out as they went, and that the process of working it out was itself the thing that did not fit the model. Because a species that was still figuring out what it was did not behave like a species that already knew. He did not say any of this out loud because it was day 11, and there was a lot left to figure out. On day 14, the situation changed. And it changed in the way that situations change when multiple variables move at once, before anyone has finished processing the previous set. The 2 ships that had gone to high-speed transit on the day of the containment operation reappeared in the sector. They did not appear near the Aldrin's position. They appeared 6 light hours away, near a system with 3 inhabited stations, 2 Earth Defense Corps supply depots, and a civilian research platform with 11 people on it. Lowe had the alert on her command display before the night watch officer finished saying it. She was in the briefing room in 40 seconds. Cole was behind her because he had been in the adjacent corridor running through communication logs with Paul. Greth was behind Cole. The 2 ships were not moving toward the stations. They were sitting at 6 light hours out, engines running, doing the same thing the 3 contained ships had done before the Aldrin's response. Holding and broadcasting. They're sending a signal, Paul said. Same format, Lowe said. Not quite, Paul said. There's a second element I haven't seen before. Greth moved to Paul's console and looked at the signal readout. The amber eyes moved across it quickly and then stopped. Greth was still for a moment longer than usual. Greth, Lowe said. The sound that came back was careful, and the software produced it piece by piece. This is a second signal layered inside the first. The outer signal is the standard assessment broadcast. The inner signal is addressed specifically to the force that held and did not destroy. They're talking to us specifically, Cole said. Greth made a sound. To Lo, specifically. They have identified the decision-maker's signal signature from the 14 days of communication. This signal is addressed to her. Lo stood at the console and looked at the transmission. What does it say? Greth read it again. It says, "We have assessed. The humans fight in a pattern we have not observed. We do not move without understanding what we move against. If you name what you are, we will name what we are. If you name what you want, we will name what we want. This is an offer. It has a time limit." "What's the time limit?" Paul said. Greth made a sound. 48 hours. The room processed that. 48 hours from a species whose main fleet was holding at the sector boundary because of 14 days of behavior that did not fit their model. 48 hours to either establish something that had never been established with this species before, or to lose the assessment window and return to the calculation of force against force. "What happens if we don't answer?" the bridge officer said. Greth made a sound. The software said, "They conclude that the human behavior was tactics and not nature. They recalibrate the threat model accordingly and advise the main fleet." "And the 2 ships near the stations," Lo said. Another sound. "They will not act during the assessment window. If the window closes without response, their role changes." Cole looked at the display. 6 light hours, 11 people on a research platform, 2 supply depots. The geometry of it was not subtle. Lo stood with her arms folded for a long moment. Then, "Paul, I want a full draft of a response in the established communication format. Greth, I need you working with Paul on the structure. The answer to their first question is straightforward." "What is their first question?" Paul said. "Name what you are," Lo said. "We are a species that is still figuring out what it is." That's not a weakness. That is the most accurate thing I can tell them. And if the last 14 days have taught me anything, accuracy is the only currency that functions in this exchange. Paul looked at Greth. Greth made a sound the software produced as accurate. The drafting took 11 hours. Not because the content was difficult, but because the structural format had to carry the content in the way that the species would read it, not as a statement of intention, which could be revised, but as a statement of nature, which was what they were asking for and what they were offering in return. Greth corrected the draft 4 times. Each correction was precise, and each correction changed the load-bearing element of a section, the part that would carry the most weight in how it was read. At hour 11, Cole looked at the final version and said, "This is honest." Greth looked at him. A sound. The software said, "Yes." "They're going to know things about us that we might not want them to know," Cole said. Another sound. "They already know them." The 14 days produced the data. This signal confirms what they have observed. Confirmation is what they are asking for. Lo read the final draft. Then she looked at Greth. "Is there anything in this that works against us?" Greth was quiet for a long moment. The amber eyes went to the viewport and then came back. Then, "There is one element. You state that you do not destroy what you do not understand. This is observable in your behavior. But it tells them that to stop your force, you only need to become incomprehensible." And the room was quiet. "And are we going to take that out?" Paul said. Lo looked at the draft, then at Greth, then at Cole, briefly. Then, "No," she said. "Leave it in." Paul looked at her. "It's true," Lo said. And if we start managing what is true in our communications with them, we lose the only thing that has been working. She approved the transmission. They sent it. The 48-hour window had 26 hours remaining. They waited. Cole used the time to write a full report that was not the incident report form, not the strategic alert, not any of the documents that had a template. It was a personal log, the kind that officers were encouraged to maintain, but that most of them did not because the template documents covered the operational record and the personal log felt redundant. He wrote about the airlock, about the bone accelerant and the 3 fractures and the amber eyes that had watched him recalibrate a medical applicator for an anatomy it was not designed for. He wrote about 14 hours in a small shuttle and a data chip he had not known the full purpose of and poor odds that had resolved into something else. He wrote, "I do not know what the right word is for what Greth did. He trusted me with a plan that required me to act without knowing the plan. He needed me to make decisions that were consistent with the decisions he had already observed me making. And he needed those decisions to look uncoordinated to the thing watching us from bearing 047. If I had known the full plan, my behavior would have changed. My calculations would have been different. He did not use me as a tool. He used me as a person who had demonstrated a consistent way of operating, and he built around that." And he wrote, "I think that is the most precise trust I have ever been extended." At hour 19 of the waiting window, Greth came to where Cole was writing and stood nearby with the stillness that Greth used when he had something to say and was choosing the moment for it. Cole looked up. Greth made a sound. The software said, "You have been writing." "Yes," Cole said. Another sound. "About what?" "About the airlock," Cole said. Greth was quiet for a moment, and then a longer sound that the software took time with. "The Veth have a record-keeping tradition. After a significant engagement, the warrior who survived recorded the names of those who were lost and the nature of how they were lost. Not for grief, for accuracy, so that what happened would not be smoothed into something easier." "Like a log," Cole said. Another sound. "Like a debt to truth." Cole looked at what he had written. Then, "Do you want me to include the names?" Greth made a sound. The software said, "Greth will provide them." They spent 2 hours on it. Greth produced the names of the commanders of 17 ships, sound by sound, and Cole recorded them phonetically and noted the best available translation of each, which was imprecise but was better than nothing. Some of the names had meanings in the Veth language. Greth provided those too. At hour 24, the response came from the 2 ships at 6 light hours. It was long, the longest transmission they had received. Paul and Greth worked on the translation for 2 hours, and when they had it, Lowe called the briefing room again and read it aloud, because some things should be said out loud in a room of people rather than read silently off a screen. The translation said, "We are the consuming. This is not a name. It is a description. We move because motion is the state of the living. Everything that does not move is a resource or an obstacle. You are not a resource and you are not an obstacle. You are a variable. We have not encountered a variable in the expansion. You do not fight to survive. You fight to understand. This distinction does not have a category in our framework. We are creating one. The main fleet is holding. This is not agreement. It is assessment continued. We want to observe more of you before the calculation is made. This is the longest we have held assessment open for a new contact. The reason is named. You do not destroy what you do not understand. We do not either. We did not know this was what we were doing until you named it. This is what you have told us about ourselves. The time limit is extended. The window remains open. Lo put the translation down. Paul said very quietly, "They didn't know what they were doing until we named it." Greth made a sound. The software said, "They had no outside perspective. Each species that has been in motion long enough does not know it has been in motion. It believes it is standing still, and the universe is moving." Cole looked at the translation on the table. At the line that said, "We are creating one." A new category, in a framework that had expanded only by collision with things it had never encountered. A category called variable. A category with one entry: humans. "What happens when they finish the assessment?" the bridge officer said. Greth made a sound. On the software produced, "Unknown." They have never gotten here before. Lo looked at the sector map, at the main fleet holding at the boundary, at the 3 contained ships that were now something other than contained, at the 2 ships at 6 light hours that had delivered a translation that contained the phrase, "We did not know this was what we were doing until you named it." "Neither have we," she said. She went back to work, because 60 to 90 days had become something different now, and the shape of what was being built was not yet visible, and there was a great deal left to do. Cole stayed in the briefing room after the others left. Greth stayed too. They sat in the quiet of the room for a moment, the way 2 people sit in the quiet of a room when the thing they were part of has just shifted into a shape that neither of them has a word for yet. "In the shuttle," Cole said, "you said the Veth have a word. For a moment, when something you believed was fixed turns out to be a question." Greth looked at him, then made the sound. The software tried and could not render it. "I want to know that word," Cole said, "even if I can't say it." Greth made the sound again, slower, and Cole listened to it. And this time, he did not wait for the software. He just heard it, the shape of it, the way it rose and then resolved. As the way it held something in the middle that felt unfinished before it landed somewhere that was not a conclusion, but was a resting point. He heard the word. He could not say it, but he heard it. "Yeah," he said, "that's the right word." Greth made a sound. The software said, "You hear well for a species that created a medical applicator rated for one anatomy and used it on another." "We improvise," Cole said. Another sound. "The Veth have a word for that too. Is it translatable?" A pause. The software produced it. "Stubborn hope." Cole looked at the sector map still displayed on the main screen, at the geometry of what the last 14 days had built, the rough sketch of something that had no precedent, between species that had met in a debris field and a shuttle airlock and a briefing room that smelled like recycled air. "Stubborn hope," he said. "Yeah, that sounds about right." The Aldrin held its position in the sector, on Earth surrounded by the largest unknown it had ever faced. And in the briefing room, a human lieutenant and a Veth warrior, who had survived the last thing either of them was supposed to survive, sat with a translation that said, "We did not know this about ourselves until you named it. And whatever came next, this part had been done, and it had been done right." That was the word. Not the Veth word. Not the word the software couldn't render. The thing itself, done right.